Hello and welcome to the Merri-Cast, the show that puts you on the fast track to business confidence. My guest this week is the absolutely wonderful Zoe Walters. Zoe was once a very senior player in the travel and fashion industries. She was high on energy, high on salary and very high powered, but she won't mind me saying that it made her utterly miserable. So she chucked it all in and now she's an entrepreneur, leading a very, very different and more enjoyable life. Her journey is a fascinating one, particularly for those of you who wonder if it could be you that could bin the trappings of corporate success for starting your own business. You can, by the way, because as Zoe tells us, the only ceiling is your mindset. Let's start though with Zoe's beginnings. Here we go.
I guess let's start with the question of who am I? And I guess I've morphed over a period of time like most of us have when we age and, our experiences shape and change who we are and where we go in life. I was not born into privilege. I'm from a very working class family and I was born in Essex. I partly grew up in London and then Cambridgeshire. I've spent quite a lot of time traveling throughout my life and moving as a child. I left school at 15. I didn't leave school with much. Wasn't particularly academic, didn't like school, was bullied quite badly. I was a big child, quite weighty. It wasn't a particularly nice experience in my life. I look back on it and you don't know what you don't know. So you look back and think, could my childhood been a bit happier around school and circumstances with family? My parents divorced quite young. So all of that was quite traumatic as a child, I guess, but I didn't realise that until much later in life. So I left school at 15 and at that time there was the YTSs, youth training schemes. So I was quite eager to get out in the world and, a bit like a magpie, sparkly things attracted my attention. And I went into the travel world. I always dreamed and imagined these places around the world. And so I went to work for Lumpoly and then Thomas Cook very quickly. So before I was kind of 18, I was already quite established in the workplace. And I've always had quite a larger life than personality. So I think people have always remembered me for my energy, a little bit cocky, a little bit provocative. And I think my weight, because I was a big girl, always kind of gave me this bit of a more clown-like attitude, hiding behind a mask because, embarrassment and not feeling good enough and all those kind of things. So, so by the time I was 20, I went to work on cruise ships and traveled the world in the casino. That's where I worked. I first a change girl earning $10 a day. That was my job and it was great. And I bloody loved it. Sorry, should I have said that? But yeah, I absolutely loved it. It was great, cracking time. Didn't realise quite how that would be so significant the rest of my life, dealing with people from different cultures and different areas around the world. And then that's what led me into HR. I went to work on the crewing side of it and how crew members move on and off a ship, and that was where I started in HR.
So you kind of move into HR, and was it what you expected? I mean, the regular listeners will know that I used to edit a magazine around HR, and there's many people who love it for the people side of things. Some people are different kinds of HR people who perhaps love it on the process side and the admin, but it sounds like you were a much more naturally sort of people person, sort of going on that. So,
I discovered through working in casino because I got approached to be the host. So to host be on the microphone and draw guests in and playful, I always put on the high rolling tables because I got more tips. I was more friendly. The Americans liked me more. Now, some of my family lived in America, so I was quite used to the American culture anyway. And people don't see it as a huge culture shift, but there's massive between a British and American culture. So for me, moving into HR, it wasn't strictly an HR job. It was more about serving people, helping them get on their way. It's a dream to work on a ship. It's a dream. So I was helping people to realize that dream, which was pretty amazing. And I was the first of the kind, or one of the first, that had come from a ship-based career job into the corporate office between Miami and London. So that was my love affair started really with people.
Okay, so you kind of went into HR. Did that mean you came off the ships then? You were in an office. Did you miss the ships? I mean, or was you had your ship sailed, so to speak, and you were ready for it?
I went back, believe it or not. So I did a land-based scenario. So I worked for another company and then started opening offices in Asia. So as a bit of a longer story, but that was a project to kind of put software so that you could put crew information around the world so that you could access it. In those days technology wasn't as advanced as it is now. So I did have a great run working on the ships, and I did miss it desperately because there's a huge community and you are with people all the time. So it's natural to withdraw, have some withdrawal, going cold turkey, where you're, with people 24/7, living with people constantly, never alone, and then you're suddenly kind of alone. So it's a bit of polarization, and it was quite tough. But I did go back and do another little stint a few years later. And then I was like, right, the cruise industry massively changed, all the rules and regulations. And I was like, no, I worked here in the best time. I'm going to leave it where it is. And remember, I'll be a passenger from now on. Thank you very much.
Okay, right. And, so you went back to the office, I say the office, I
Yeah.
mean, to offices sort of after that, and you kind of got into this HR world. But I mean, you're being quite modest about it so far in terms of you kind of rose quite rapidly from what I can see, and
Yeah,
you've moved on to some very big jobs.
I did. And I guess I've always been somebody that can hold my nerve and have a great mask. For good and bad, that can be negative and positive. But I remember the thing that fascinated me, because when I left the ships the second time, I worked for Norwegian Cruise Lines in an interim HR manager job. And that was a great opportunity for me because it meant I worked on the ships. The shipbuilding side is very different than the cruising side. So you're building ships, you've got architects, very different like profile type that you're dealing with, higher salaries, more political, more that's a much longer time period. It's 5 years at that time, it was 5 years to build a ship, 2.5 years concept, 2.5 years construction. And the other side of it was then running the sales and marketing office for Norwegian on there, not on the ship side, nothing to do with ships anymore, but then more shore side sales and marketing of the cruises to passengers. So it was a very different lens than what I'd done at Carnival. But yeah, and then from there, it just kind of was I moved into fashion and it kind of went straight up. But I haven't got married and had kids. And I think that's been I can't ignore that that's been something in my life that I felt I had to make a choice. Is it have a family or is it career? And I've chosen the career path. Would I do it again? Absolutely no regrets. But in those days, there was a distinctive, I'm a female in a very male dominated area. If I step out, do I lose everything that I've worked for? And that was the choice that I made at that time.
And on having made a choice like that, huge life choice, about which way you're sort of going, the move into fashion, I mean, everyone tells me in the fashion, it becomes all consuming, sort of you're involved in that area. And, listeners can't see this, but you're laughing at the moment and about that. But tell me about that big step into the world of fashion. Was it the Devil Wears Prada, or was it
Well,
not quite like that?
There is some. I'll have a quick story around that. So I mentioned that I was quite a big child, and that kind of carried on until my sort of teen, in my 20s. And I had a very bad health scare. I got diagnosed with diabetes and I had to make some drastic changes. So at that time, I'd lost quite a lot of weight and I'd always dreamed of wearing a diesel pair of jeans. And suddenly I can fit into a diesel pair of jeans. And I was like, I've become fixated with fashion. I think it goes hand in gloves with sort of appearance and vanity and my age. And so when I worked for Diesel, it was without doubt the best time in my career. And in fact, one of my clients today, we met when we met at Diesel. He's a managing director of a company today. And relationships massively formed, still in touch with a lot of people. That was the best time of my career. And I was a head of HR for them for quite some years. And in the UK, then I dealt with a lot of European, and then I moved over to New York for them to deal with North America. So it was a real growth spurt for me. But that was at the moment when I'd only ever really worked in a market or a region, and I hadn't worked in a head office. That's a whole different ballgame, which the next career move certainly took me there. So Diesel was that time of my life where they were so authentic. You didn't need a diversity and inclusion strategy because people just were allowed to be their rebellious selves. That was all about the brand. The only company I've worked for that super lived, breathed, ate their values, their whole identity, was just phenomenal. And they had great commercial success at that period of their evolution. So I loved it. I had a great run. I think I was there maybe sort of 10 years. So that was a very big time of my life where I got full, I think because I won the hearts and minds of the bosses, I got full autonomy. I actually wrote all of their learning development programs. They didn't have any. So they gave me a little bit of money and let me run with it. And it became sort of a global footprint. And I loved it. It was just so freeing. I didn't ever feel like it was a day at work.
A question for you here. It sounds like you were in a very entrepreneurial environment there, where you had some latitude for sort of making a big difference to a business. And I know that sort of you then went on to sort of join other organizations, and I see Condé Nast, of course, sort of publishing it, and I can see the logical career progression in terms of what you'd already been doing and how that would work. But Condé Nast is a bigger fish, is it, in terms of size and scale?
Absolutely. In between there, I went to Adidas and I worked at their
Okay.
headquarters. I moved to Germany. So from New York, I was in with Diesel, and Adidas had been knocking at my door for a couple of years. And I'd always said, no, I'm super happy at Diesel. But America was a very different ball game for me. And I didn't find my heart in it as much. And it was time for me to move on at that point. So I thought, I've learned what I've got to do. I've created a legacy. It's time to move on. Moved to Germany. And lo and behold, moving from New York to Germany was, in a digital capacity, you couldn't get further into the scale. You're going from a place where everything is online and everything is digital to nothing, like as in people don't really order anything online. And if you do, it's very difficult. And so I headed up the digital component. So that was something that Adidas didn't have. So from a HQ perspective, I become very quickly very visible and liked or not liked for two reasons. One, people liked me because I was quite personable. But two, I was heading up a division where they were taking money from everywhere in the business to reposition it into digital. So there was a lot of, I guess, storytelling that was required. My job was pretty much to get people, mediate them, get them into the same way of thinking around what's best for the business. And it was a real pivotal role for me because it allowed to work in a very, very, so there's a digital, I guess, component, which is this startup environment in this very established organization, 66,000 people. This was what I look back on at the time in it, was incredibly difficult, incredibly challenging, and expedited my growth in 2 years, which I probably would have done in 10 years. So it gave me more political awareness. I had some very challenging people around me that, gave me a good run for my money. And boy, did they teach me. At that time, I was a little bit more resentful, perhaps. But looking back, thinking, actually, it was a gift. And I'm very grateful for that. That then led me to Condé Nast, which were, we know what you do at Adidas and we know what you've done. We've got 17 odd brands that need to be digitalized. Can you come here? I went in to meet the chairman and he said straight away, Jonathan Newhouse, I want to hire you. And I was like, well, let's go. Now, that was a little bit more Devil's Wears Prada, in tongue in cheek, I say, because there is snobbery that comes along with a brand like that. It's world renowned and it's earned its way to be there. And, towards the end of my career there, working as and acting as a chief people officer, people like Anna Wintour were my business partners. These are the business that I'm serving. And another, sideline is that comes with a whole weight of other stuff that just my job stopped being HR and more about managing personalities and working between China time zones and New York, which is a vast, that was a hard job physically, energetic and changing. The dynamic publishing is traditional, trying to bring newness into what is traditional thinking and hierarchy is not easy.
No, it's not. I mean, and I've worked in the publishing industry where a smaller publishing house where we were trying to introduce digital around about the time that I was in my sort of later years there. And I almost felt that there was a sort of a jealousy of the person who was responsible for doing that. And so I can totally relate. Also, Condé Nast, I mean, it's a big organization, as you said, lots of personalities in organizations like that. I mean, you've talked quite openly on social media around the sort of cumulative effect on working in some of those bigger organizations, on how that affects you in terms of happiness and burnout. Was that the start of that moment where you were starting to feel that this is starting to affect me as an individual?
There's one thing there's been profound change in my mindset in the last few years. Through the last 10 years, I have become a psychologist. I've become an NLP master practitioner. I a timeline therapist, hypnotherapist, all because I want to understand why the traits and personalities that we have, right? More so for myself, it started off as a self because I had quite bad breakdown, a burnout in my some years ago. And I realized the common denominator between all of these burnouts, because I've had multiple, is me. It's not the organization. The organization will continue to push. If you're a high potential and you are smart and fast and quick, and I'm not saying I'm the best HR practitioner out there, I'm probably one of the most creative and proactive. I see a gap, I'm a strategic thinker, and that's where I want to play. I kind of want to help the business get to its overarching goal. So by doing that means that I've usually been faster, quicker, more innovative and pioneering, which leaves my colleagues behind. And that becomes very disliked. So you start to be by yourself. I didn't realize this at the time, but every job I've been in, there has been a burnout aspect. And what's driven that is probably I was 15 when I left school. I don't have the education. I've done it in my later years. I'm in a male-dominated area. I need to work harder. I'm paid less than my colleagues. You know, all of these factors were keep going, you know, be better, be better, be better. And that took all my feminine energy away, making me more masculine, more aggressive, more in my personality, which at Condé Nast was the flip. That was the mirror for me, was my time to draw back and say, hang on a moment. I earn more money than I've ever earned. I have less freedom than I've ever had. I don't have any autonomy. I'm constantly under this. This doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel right. And I'm constantly reminded, you don't have the socio background to be here. You're a council kid. You left school at 15. That's my interpretation. That's my illusion. That's my insecurity raising there. But that was what I played with, to the point of I'm up at 5, I'm dealing with China, I'm up at midnight dealing with New York, because everyone's like, now. Now, did I get results? Absolutely. But whose expense? Mine. My mental health, my physical health, everything. So it was a good mirror for me to kind of go, okay, enough already.
Was there a moment then that you just thought enough and actually things have got to change? Obviously, if you spent the last 10 years, it's been something that's been sort of almost like teaching yourself about yourself. And there must have been, though, a tip over moment where you just thought, that's it, and my life is going to change from this point.
There was 2 moments, and one is linked to the other. I was at Adidas and I'd worked incredibly hard. I felt harder than some of my colleagues. I got results, and I worked for somebody that was a great teacher for me. And there was a moment when there was a meeting, and the colleagues that I started on the same day with were all promoted. I was the only one that wasn't. And it was public, public recognition. And I was said, and it was even like, oh, never mind, Zoe, publicly. Never mind, Zoe, your turn will be next. And I thought to myself, I congratulate, very happy for my colleagues, super happy. But there was a moment that I thought, why do I do what I do? It's not for accolade, it's not for promotion, but if there's no value that I add and there's no value that's seen, I'm done here. And my thought then was, I know that my time in the corporate world is limited, and I really need to find the strength to take that leap. So when I left, I gave him my notice pretty much immediately. It was like okay, no more bullshit. So you've got to just do this, because this is now the time. Your energy. So I gave him my notice, and at that point I had Nike in the background. So they put me on garden leave, which was a great gift, because it gave me time to think. And then I got allured to Condé Nast, a very nice salary, and I wished to God. And I don't do this now. I will never think about, my decisions will never be made in money again. It will never. You can offer me £1 million to do something that doesn't feel right in my soul. I'm not doing it. I ain't doing it for anybody. And that's the council kid now going, you know what? She's a warrior. She's coming out and she's going to say, no, this is not worth my peace, and it's not worth my sanity. So at that point, I got driven. Money, no, money, do it for the money. Don't do it for this dialogue between my head and my heart was so loud, and the head won. And in fact, even today, I'm having a LinkedIn discussion because people are saying to me, it's all right for you. You earn 300 grand a year. Was it? I've had some pretty big battles. It's not the figure. It's about your decision making, whether it's 30 quid, 300 quid, 3,000, 300,000, 3 million. At what cost is that money to you? And it's got to come down to your values and your identity. If it doesn't sit with you, don't do it. If it does sit with you, do it. My point is, don't make your decisions, Zoe, I'm talking to myself when I say this, don't make decisions about money, because it does not happen. It does not lead to happiness. It does not lead to peace. So there were the 2 points. And
Yeah,
then I was
yeah,
like, Condé Nast, there was a discussion with another senior executive at the time, my boss, and he said, do you want, are you really in to go for the permanent role as CPO? And I said, no, this cannot be for me. 2 weeks later, I was gone. And I remember this no coming out my mouth, and I was thinking, who said that? Who said that? Are you crazy? And I knew when I walked out of there was a moment years ago. Nicole Kidman and Tom Cruise used to be married, and there was a
yeah.
moment in the press where when they got divorced, Nicole Kidman, I know for the readers watching this, I'm with my hands outstretched and my face towards the sun. She come out of that courtroom going, yes, that was me. That was me walking out the office going, oh my God, I feel so relieved. The
Yeah,
scare didn't come after, but the relief was enormous.
yeah,
Enormous.
yeah. Okay, so you walked out, arms outstretched, thank God. But anyone who goes and looks at your LinkedIn profile, can see that you've set up a number of sort of businesses. But you were a CPO for a little while. Were you just trying to Hudson, Holdings? Were you trying to plow both furrows at the same time? I'm not quite sure what was
Yes.
happening there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Again, an ego perspective. So when I left Condé Nast, I wasn't fit to work for anybody. In fact, what I did do, and I know the readers can't see this, but for you, I went away and I wrote 3 fiction books. This is my first published one.
Right.
And I wrote about personal transformation. It is fictional, but that's what I did. And it was the best therapy I ever did, writing books, because I become empty. Void. Every emotion was written in every creative way, and I got an editor and a coach, and I wrote this trilogy. I'd love to get it to a Netflix series. That's one of my desires, because I think it can help people, and it's all wrapped around the things that I do today, which is all around personal transformation. And so I did that, and I hid away, and I didn't earn any money for nearly 2 years. And so when people say to me, it's all right for you, I didn't pay my mortgage for 6 months. I didn't have any money to pay anything. And I had to go through some pretty tough times. Now, the higher you climb, the higher you fall, right? And the harder the fall. And this was where I experienced my kind of ego death. Suddenly, the phone wasn't ringing. There's no Zoe from Condé Nast anymore. There's no Zoe from Adidas. I'm just Zoe. This was probably the biggest learning in my life to date, is that suddenly I wasn't popular and no one wanted to know. And that created this whole trigger of insecurity. It was a really dark moment in my life. But out of that, as I was plowing away, I was like, do you know what? I never want somebody to go through what I'm going through. I don't want them to go through what I'm going through, and I can help them. I've got all the tools, all the resources, and I wrote a business plan around the outplaces. I went to some investors, I took it forward, got a little bit of investment and got it up and running, and now it's live today. So that was more about transitioning executives. And what I didn't want to do is publicly air my laundry publicly do that at that time, because I was hurting. Now I can do it because I'm over it, and I can help resonate with others. But there's this kind of like, oh my gosh, my pride is so hurt, and how can people know how I really feel? And I can't tell people I'm looking for a job, and all of these things. So that is why I set up the Outplaces. That was purely a passion project to say, I don't want people to go through what I go through. And then that led me to bringing on the Zigzag Consulting.
Okay, so tell me about Zigzag Consulting, because I just find this fascinating. You were talking about transformation through mindset, and this is you were talking about in terms of having the passion to do what you do, and there's no shortage of passion. I can see that, Zoe. So just tell me a bit about this business, about why you set it up, and also I'm interested to know about those early steps in terms of doing that. Some of the things as an entrepreneur that you did right, and some of the things you perhaps didn't.
Absolutely. So Zigzag is because life doesn't go in a straight line. It really doesn't. And at different moments, you need different things on that journey. And it's okay to ask for help. One of the biggest things as an entrepreneur is not asking for help. And I would encourage anybody. Now, there's lots of people that will offer help, and there's few that will come through for you. Do not be deterred, because that is going to happen. You need to surround yourself by great, energetic people that will come through for you, even if it's sharing, liking, subscribing, supporting, being a soundboard, whatever it might be. It's important to have those people around you. But going back to Zigzag, so I created it because I wanted to use my skill and wisdom. And in my brain, I'm transitioning between, I want to coach people and mentor people. I've got a number of projects, which I'll briefly mention. And how do I do that and make money at the same time? So I've been in financial poverty for quite a couple of years. I need to get out of that hole. And so consulting was the way for me, is like, how do I do that? And so the clients that I do have, I look at merger and acquisition or big transformational projects or anything where they want to increase revenue. My job is to kind of like, where are you now? Where do you want to be? And what's the roadmap between that? So I went into Hudson to help them go from 135 million to a 300 million organization. They're on that path. And, but what I wanted to do was see how a part-time remote based, and it didn't work, if I'm honest. So I still work with them. I just have a different capacity. We've got a really strong HRD there now that operationalizes, but my job is really to help the board to not only coach them, because there's a mindset shift that everyone needs to have to be more successful, but also in a strategic commercial sense. So I do have specific duties I do there, and that's one. I've got other clients, so I stagger them, and I've got some great clients that I love working with, and again, from past relationships, which is awesome. We've kind of grown up together. And then I've got other passion projects. So I'm creating programs and retreats and immersion experiences for underprivileged children. So we want to do it as a sponsored program. And this is with one of my clients, a non-for-profit that really touches my heart. So I want to be able to host immersion experiences and coach younger children, 17 to 24, underprivileged, to give them more. I don't have kids. So I cannot spend my life learning, spending all my education. I'm still in education and not giving it back. I can't do that. That's kind of like feels wrong. Yes, I've got nieces and nephews, but they don't have so much need. They're born into a bit more privilege than the audience that I'm thinking about. So I'm hosting retreats in France, Ireland, Jamaica, and I'm going out to Thailand to look at those. So Zigzag has a number of things, which is immersion experiences, retreats, coaching, mentoring, and consulting. So that's why Zigzag, because I want to work on projects that fill my soul. I don't want to work on anything anymore that doesn't. So that's where, and it's all around personal transformation. Same thing, just slightly different lenses.
Okay, so there's a lot of things there that
Yes.
you're doing. How do you make sure as an entrepreneur that you're making sure that you're doing them well? Because if you've got lots of things going on, there's always a chance, like juggling, that you might drop all the balls at the same time and so on. How do you keep them all on track?
Well, so that is the great thing about being an entrepreneur. So my values is freedom, intelligence. Freedom to me is about being able to work anywhere from the world, being able to serve people. Intelligence is sharing intelligence, growing intelligence, transforming through intelligence. That's why I continually learn. That's one of my biggest values, as well as forgiveness, trust, honesty. There's a whole pile of things that are my drivers. And one of the biggest things that I've been challenged with is doing it all myself. I've had to become a marketeer, a finance person. I've had to grow wings that I never knew I had. Am I great at them? No. So I've had to outsource. I've had to grow a team that are there to help me. I have a social media team. I have people that set up my events for me. I do. I've got a great network, and that's taken me a while to be able to communicate really well. Gosh, it's really challenged how I communicate. One of my top values used to be communication. Now it's comprehension. You can communicate what you want, but if people don't understand it, it's another story. So growing the team, and that's why you've got to ask for help, and you've got to be prepared to fork out money. You can't do everything on a shoestring. You've got to have a business plan. How I keep on track, I have a coach. I have a coach. I believe everybody needs a coach.
Yeah.
Somebody that's there for you, that listens to you, gets you, inspires you, and walks you through bad times, because there are bad times. And bad times for me is crap. I've got like 10 things on which do I give but I have to kind of field it out and be very diligent, because I am a magpie. I know I'm a starter and not a finisher. So I have lots of projects, and if I can't finish them, so I surround myself with a team that can.
Okay, but the awareness of one's own strengths and weaknesses is really important when you're helping other people as well. I mean, if you are helping somebody would you be then therefore helping somebody in an area if they said, my biggest weakness is, which is also your biggest weakness? I mean, did you sort of then think, well, I'm not sure I'm the best person, or are you the best person? Because actually knowing you're not so good in a particular area may help you sort of have empathy with them in that particular area. I'm just interested in is you helping people with the same sorts of problems in what you're doing?
Yes. So I guess my niche is really about identity, values, beliefs, limiting beliefs, and then vision, mission, purpose, kind of like in any organization and any individual. That's what I call chaos to clarity. You need to be really clear about who you are, what you want, why you want it, what happens if you don't get it. And because when you've got all that clear and you're really solid and you've got your North Star, and I usually start with asking people, write a eulogy. What do you want people to remember you by? It's not going to be your job. It's going to be energy, how you make people feel. When you look back at your life, what is it that you want? Your children or your grandkids, or what is it? Or not that, maybe that's not your path. What is it that you want and why? And that comes down to values, identity. They're all the drivers, right? So you link those together. And then somebody is not, they're compelled, they're motivated, insatiable to run forward at breakneck speed. And let's not forget, the world is moving fast. Isn't it nice to know that you're going 1,000 miles a minute in the right direction rather than 1,000 miles a minute in the wrong one? Or kind of going, oh, not sure. Should I? Am I really? Well, keep connecting to your why, keep connecting to your purpose, because that's how you know you're in alignment. And that's what my job is. Now, most of the people that come to me are not clear about one area of their life. And it's usually a presenting problem, which is my career no longer fills me with joy. I don't know what to do. You know what? It's nothing to do with the career. It's everything to do with you're not connected to your why. And once you get that, everything becomes clear. If you're in the wrong relationship, if you're on the wrong job, or in the right job and the right relationship, it's this discovery moment. And that usually comes over 6 to 8 hours, 10 hours max of working with that client or individual. And then they get this moment, which is like my head explodes and I kind of see clearly now. And that's what I do. Now, when that moment happens, there's a fork in the road. I'm normally then the person that somebody says, I trust you. Of course, rapport and trust have been built. And I'm saying, I'm now not a sales coach. I can introduce you to other people because I'm not the best seller. I'm not. It fills me with dread to even think about that, right? It's a service mindset. Now I can help them with their mindset to evolve, but I'm not a salesperson. And if you want somebody to teach you about finance and sales and marketing and branding, I'm not going to be your best person. But I have a great network and I work with trusted coaches that I've worked with. And I say, so our journey's done. I'm going to now introduce you to and have a great time. And maybe you'll come back to me in the future about something else, but my job's done. So I'm a part of the process and I like to work in collaboration. It can be very, very lonely working as an entrepreneur, very. So you have to be around great people all the time.
Where is there a number one problem that people, this is an impossible question, I'm sorry about this, but is there a number one typical reason where people find that you're helping people with? Now, presumably it's here, in the mind that they're actually doing, but is it something in particular? Is it the self-limiting beliefs?
Yep.
Because you can have some of it, but then you can say, actually, I'm going to just try a month without these self-limiting beliefs and try, but eventually we're all kind of ingrained in many years of self-limiting beliefs. And how do you kind of get them to sort of do that in a sustainable way rather than sort of doing it for a month and then collapsing in a heap somewhere because they can't sustain?
There's great questions. Thank you for asking. Right. So let's kind of break this down. People come to me for two reasons. I'm not good enough and I'm not lovable. It comes down to self-esteem and self-worth. They might not say those words, but I do interventions and techniques to get them to that point where they realize we keep call it chunking up, chunking down in NLP terms. You've got to get to the root cause and the gestalt. The gestalt, there's a decision and a belief that's been established at some point in lifetime, whether it's in the womb, could be from past lives, if you believe in that. But there's a decision and a belief been made. You have to collapse that, find it, collapse it. The memory still stays there, but what you're doing is breaking the emotion attached to that pattern. So it stops being a trigger. It stops having a hook in future behavior, because your brain, your subconscious, is like a little filing cabinet. Every time something happens in your life now, it kind of goes through its filing cabinet and says, oh, we've been here before, and this is how it played out. So it's going to play out again. So by breaking that pattern, and it is all about that, is what gives us a chance to react differently, the trigger moment. So most people come with, I don't know if I'm in the right career. Okay, well, what that boils down to is you're not feeling good enough to be in the one that you've got, or you don't feel good enough to go for the next thing. It's always around the same thing, but it's presented differently for each person. They don't know that. So over time, we have to unravel and go back to, so what's really important? Let's strip it all back. You're a bit like an onion, layer by layer. And it's always, and I know that this is a source of frustration for a lot of people, it always comes down to childhood. Every parent has brought their child up the best way they know how, not on fact, Nobody's a textbook baby. Nobody knows what's right. They do what they feel is right at that time. And is it always the right thing? No. Does every parent, are they impeccable when their children are being naughty and they shout at them and they're impatient and irritated? Of course, it's happened. It's human nature, but we don't understand the trauma that we cause children by shouting and saying. That's where beliefs are made. I remember singing as a child and being told, shut up, because my mum had a headache. I hope she doesn't listen to this. But she had a headache and I thought I was a terrible singer. Well, I'm not the best singer out there, but I can hold a tune. But it made me think. And that's just a silly example. But as a 6-year-old, that was like, okay, I can never sing because I'm not good enough because mummy says I'm not. And that's what we do, unfortunately. So when we get into adulthood, we've got to be prepared to look at our shadows. We don't know what we don't know. We choose to lock things away and repress and suppress. And the triggers that we get and the people that come in our path are all opportunities when these kind of come to the surface for us to manage them, which is when you can break the pattern. So you've got to raise the emotion to the surface, welcome it, get to terms with it, break the pattern, and then you can move on. So it can be very challenging and very painful for people to do that. But I wrap that in a process. I'm not just a regular coach that's kind of asking a bunch of questions. There's interventions and techniques from a psychological perspective and an NLP perspective, timeline therapy, hypnotherapy. So I kind of bundle it all in and we make headway together. But there has to be rapport. There has to be trust.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you can't get the result for the client.
Okay. Well, thank you for saying it was a great question. It was a great answer as well, by the way. So that's great.
I hope it made sense.
Yes, I totally did. I mean, and we want to give listeners the confidence they need to succeed as entrepreneurs. How do you, in terms of reflections, I mean, your positive and negative experiences of being an entrepreneur, I mean, what would you say was the sort of number one thing that you have learned as an entrepreneur that you'd want to pass on to our listeners?
I think you've got to have you've got to be connected to your purpose. You've got to be prepared to fail. I don't see it as failing. I see it as learning. You've got to be prepared to really dig into your purpose. What gives you energy? Know yourself so well that your intuition is your GPS, your sat navigation, because that is going to guide you. There will be people that disappoint you and don't come through for you. Have kindness, forgive them. They're doing the best they can. So let things go with it. Sometimes you just got to move with the ambiguity, the flow. Keep going back to, is this right for me? My instinct. Keep going back to that because that's going to pull you through. And the moments when you're struggling, say you're struggling. Who's around me that will help lift me up? Who's there at my side? I know who my best friends are, and I know who I can call and vomit my frustration or my happiness, and it stays confidential. It stays there. No one's going to start bleating about my business. Your circle suddenly becomes very small, and you can differentiate between people on the path with you, but people that are there for you. So there's discernment. I'd say discernment is going to be the biggest thing. Know self and discern what's really right for you through your instinct. Know that well.
That is brilliant. I mean, so you've talked a little bit about what you're up to now. Is there one thing in particular that you're working on that you want to talk about? Like you mentioned retreats as well, and I see you've been posting about that and so on. Is that the thing that you're particularly excited about? What's the thing you're most excited about? If you could just narrow it down to one.
I am. So retreat may be a word that resonates in different ways to different people. I call them also immersion experiences. So I think accelerators are fantastic. And my biggest thing about what I'm doing right now is delivering an accelerated program, but integration is done so poorly. And that's the next thing, is that it's great to pluck somebody out of their everyday life, put them in these immersion experiences, scramble their brains, hearts, minds, get them into a place where they're in flow, and then drop them back in the old world. So there's this, I'm bringing to market, I guess, in my way, that immersion experience, and then this longevity of mentoring and coaching, which is not normally sold, I guess, in that package way. So that's what I'm working on. I'm going to France. That's my first one this year. And that's a spiritual transformative experience for 7 days. Then I'll be doing Ireland with getting into nature, executives, bringing them into peace and stillness, because I think this is where we struggle to connect with self, that kind of knowing. And then I'm in Jamaica towards the end of the year we're doing 17 to 24-year-old, similar thing, slightly different lens. I want to learn from this group. So it's going to be a pilot. I want to see what works, what doesn't, really kind of, because that's where I really want to play the most. So that's really where I want to focus on: coaching, immersion, integration, kind of these aspects. That's what I'm really focused on.
And there's a little bit of a full circle going on here, because you're back to traveling again, aren't you? You're doing more of these things overseas. So you're kind of meshing the great bits from your previous sort of life into the purpose that you now have.
And there's one thing very profound that I'd like to share about that is, if we sit in our homes every day, which we become accustomed to, we sit in what is comfort. Now, I love my home, but I'm selling my home to get so uncomfortable. This is what I believe needs to happen. I'm selling everything I've got. I'm giving it all up. I'm not giving it up because, well, I say I'm giving it up, but I say that fondly, and I don't feel a loss about it. I'm giving up everything I know to just couch surf, to be a nomad, to be not attached to money. I don't want to do something because there's a price tag. I don't want a mortgage. I don't want debt. I want nothing, that I'm starting from zero. And I truly want to be what I talk about. And so when people say, yeah, it's right for you to earn 300 a year. Okay, well, try being homeless. I put myself in that position. I don't mean homeless on the streets, but I'm putting myself so far out my comfort zone. And that means also going to different places on my own and managing. It's necessary. If you want you to accelerate your personal growth, you've got to get uncomfortable. There's no two ways about it. So I'm doing it for myself again.
Somebody was saying to me once, is that if the comfort zone is such a great place, why is everyone always trying to leave it? And and so on. There is a kind of logic to doing that people are always trying to sort of push themselves and so on. But that is quite an extreme example. So I mean, that is, well, I don't know, do I call it brave? What do you want me to call it?
I think I'm a super courageous person. I always have been. I am a risk taker. And you know what is so lovely, Trevor, is that I trust myself implicitly. I trust my instincts. I trust my judgment. I trust everything. And I have a knowing. I can't always describe it. I can't always say, but this is when you know yourself so well. And if I know situations, I know my triggers, I know, and I want to test that like to the next level. And I know that we are only imprisoned by our thoughts. Our only ceiling is our mindset, and we truly can do anything we choose to. If you look at paraplegic Olympians that are missing normal, able-bodied, and they're still at the top of their game. Why? Because their thoughts, it's not necessarily their body. So they are always a constant inspiration, saying, by all standards, they shouldn't be able to do that, but they do. Why? Because they have great people around them. They've got the mindset, a winning mindset, and they trust people. They've got to trust themselves, trust their instincts. And so putting myself in this situation, and I'm sure I will buy property at some point and build a retreat in Ireland or wherever it might be, Jamaica or whatever it is. I also want to fall in love. I don't want to keep working. I want to fall in love. I want to be with my soul connection, my twin flame, whatever you want to call them. I'm nearly 50. And so I've given myself to my work, and I still want to, but I want to do it in a really conscious way. And I don't want to do things for money. I want to come from, does it feel right? How's my energy around it? Yeah, good, let's go. Or no, and I want to be guided by that. And so it's taken me a long time to get here, and I want to encourage people to get there quicker. If I can reach children, I say teens, youths, 18 to 24, and get them to know what I know at the age of 50, boy, would their life be dynamic.
Well, there you go. Zoe's such a bundle of energy, and it's difficult to listen and not feel inspired by her. For me, the key points she made were that it's all about trusting yourself implicitly, understanding your purpose, and of course asking for help. These three themes come up time and again, but I think Zoe's story makes the case as well as any one of our interviewees to date. Thank you so much for your time, Zoe. And thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd love for you to subscribe, rate and review through your usual podcast provider. And if you want to find out more about the Merri-Cast or our business, Merribourne Media, you can find us on LinkedIn. Don't forget to join us for our next episode. But until then, thanks for listening.